topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you ready for Insights to Incite? Ready or not, it's showtime. Now get ready to listen in and watch right here on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Join us and together we will escape the mundane. Insights to Incite, here is your host, Brandon Lawson.
Hello, hello. It has been said that this is the librarian of our past, the speaker of our present, and the prophet of our future. This is Brandon Lawson here, coming to you as I typically do from my home here in Ohio. And today we are going to get into the third lesson on the subject, or in the series of Matters That Matter. And today's subject is about our attitude. So, with that said, first I want to thank all my viewers who are here today looking in through Talk4 TV and my listeners on W4CY Radio. So, how are you? What kind of mood are you in? What have the thoughts been that's run through your mind? There's no need to share, to answer that or what have you, at least to me, or to chime in, but just answer it for yourself. And have any of those thoughts been there in your mind, just sitting and simmering? Have any sunk downward, into your heart and taken up residence there? You see, the answer to these questions will help us to rightfully depict the state of our heart and the state of our spirit. And you could say that they will help us to depict, whether it's ourselves or someone else, getting the true answers of these questions will help us to understand the attitude that we each have at this point in time. Because yes, our attitude is the librarian of our past, the speaker of our present, and the prophet of our future. Can you see that? As we think of a librarian, first of all, they speak for the library, the staff, and what goes on there. Many times if there's someone from public relations that would interview, they usually look to the librarian. And at a library, we got all kinds of different mediums of information. It's loaded with information, from books, magazines, to DVDs, to maybe old archive films, but it's loaded with information. And when it comes to each of us as individuals, we'll find that each one of us, the experiences we've been through, the experiences of our past, the education of our past, what we've learned, what's been taught to us, and the evolution of ourselves. And when I speak of evolution, I mean, has your life evolved? Are you still stuck in the same rut you were 20 years ago? Or have you advanced? That's what I'm speaking of by evolution. I'm not referring to us coming from apes or monkeys or what have you. This is about how has our life evolved or hasn't. That will affect, the attitude that comes out, that speaks through us, and it's, those things of the past, have a way of shaping our present, just as the things today that we do, the things we, what we surround ourselves with and who we are will impact the person we are tomorrow, and a year from now, and a decade from now, and so on. So if you can see how, that you may not have ever thought of, your attitude being the librarian of your past. But if you can recognize how that is, you'll see that. And then as we think of the speaker of the present, well, speaker, self-explanatory. I mean, it speaks of who we are now. And, and have you ever realized or have you come to notice how, our attitude is always sincere? It always speaks the truth. At times, we may not want people to know how we really feel, so our words don't express the complete truth, or it may not be true at all. But our attitude never lies. Your attitude is consistently sincere and much truer than your words in many cases. And as it speaks, it'll speak up and speak out. And the thing you'll notice is it doesn't have to be called upon to speak. It doesn't even have to verbally speak. Your attitude comes forth, it spills out through your demeanor, through, the posture, the body language. Yeah. And so your attitude cannot be shut down. It's either going to reflect you in a positive way, a positive manner, or a negative. But we can't hide it. It's there. So you see how, in that instance, we can recognize how it's the speaker of our present. And then, as we think of the prophet of our future, well, as many of you know, a prophet, a true prophet, not a false prophet, but a true prophet was one that God spoke to and had him speak to the people on behalf of God. And he often would prophesy of something that's to come, and that would be a prediction that would come true. But it wasn't just something that person on their own figured out. It was God told them what's to come. And since God was not down here with the people, this is in the Old Testament, and that, he couldn't speak directly to them, so he spoke to another person who then took it to the people. And often when the prophet spoke, it wasn't the best news, It could be of the wrath that's to come. But anyway, the prophet spoke of what's to come. It spoke of the future. And our attitude, the things we've been through, and that the things spoken to us, the things we've done personally, not just done to us, but also what we've done, what we've put ourselves in or put others in, shapes and molds us. And you'll notice that how, our attitude, it is through these experiences, through the education, through the evolution of our life or lack thereof, it shapes, it molds us. And what comes forth from that is, the life that we walk into, the life we live out. You could say in many respects that it directs and produces our life's film. If you think of yourself and the life you live as an ongoing documentary, your attitude is what helps steers it, and it will be a major part of what guides you into whatever you come into. So in that respect, it's the prophet of our future. We're going to step away for a brief moment, and when we come back, we'll get into more of how we can go about growing and restoring a right attitude and doing our best to have a better life that we walk into as we move forward. We'll be right back.
Wow, that was insightful. Stay tuned as we go on a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Insights to Incite right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Are you seeking a speaker or coach who speaks life into your people? If so, look no further. Brandon Lawson is one who will inspire and motivate his audience, as well as empathize and relate to all. Reach out to Brandon and let him be your speaker and life coach by sending an email to brandon@connectandimpact.net or calling him at 513-520-7597. Brandon looks forward to speaking with you, to you, and for you. Let's connect and impact today. Insights to Incite, a real show with real life messages. This show, which can be found on radio, TV, and our podcast, gives us insight to incite us to action and to excellence. Watch and or listen to Insights to Incite live at noon Eastern Time every Thursday on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Check out our past episodes on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us each week, and together we will escape the mundane. We are back with more Insights to Incite, so get ready and tune in to listen and watch. Now, once again, let's join Brandon Lawson.
Okay, so now, as we just got done saying right before we stepped away to our commercial, we spoke of how our attitude is the librarian. We spoke of how our attitude is the librarian of our past, the speaker of our present, and the prophet of our future. And I wonder if you've ever realized how, many of our thoughts at first were just thoughts, but as they, sat there in our mind and simmered and, baked, how they in turn become beliefs. And beliefs will often be what guides us, what we believe to be true, what we believe to be important, in effect, is our values. That's what guides our life. That's what we, live, what steers us in that. But within there, you can see how, the more a thought just sits in your mind, the more it simmers, the warmer, hotter it gets, so to speak. What happens is it becomes strengthened. And then, in turn, it gets fortified even stronger until it reaches a point to where it's solidified as a belief of yours. And a belief, and being tied to is where our values come from, is what we believe to be important and stuff. That speaks to our lives and what we do, who we are, what we will experience as we move ahead. And many times we think of a culture as something of a, bigger, more people are involved, not just of a household, but maybe of a company or a region of the world or something. But our culture, all it really is a cult, not OCCULT, but then CULT. A cult is really just a belief. And the culture that we are in the midst of is, what we as people, it's the set of beliefs we value, we adhere to. It's what guides us. And that in turn, plays a big part in, what you experience. You think of sports teams, ones who are in the cellar, the basement every year, perennial losers, for lack of a better term, not to be rude, but those who can't seem to figure out how to win games, they always find out how to lose them. Well, those teams, the players start pointing the finger, looking at one another. When one messes up, the other's coming down on them, then the other comes down on him, and it's on and on and on. It just splits them. The atmosphere, the climate of a team is not really much of a team. It's several individuals, but not a team. But that's, what you find in a culture where, things are just going haywire. And what often happens, and where they become perennial, losers, always in the last place or in the bottom of the league, is that, this becomes so common that they come to accept it. And that's something we don't want to do, whether we're talking about a team we play on or we're speaking to, just the life we live. We don't want to accept, a life that's subpar. And not to say that when others are subpar that we reject them, but we don't want to accept for ourselves to live a life of mediocrity or, or underprivileged, under status. So now if we see that from the standpoint of those who are, suffer loss after loss after loss every year, compared to the winning teams, those who are contenders, those who are always up there, vying for the title. Yeah, they make mistakes. I mean, that's to be expected. No, none of us are without, the mistakes. We all make them. But when one messes up, another comes over and says, "I got your back. We'll get through this. I got you." And plus, people are more apt to take responsibility because they're not going to be, you know, come down on or be the seen as the one who screwed everything up. Instead, they got the support of their teammates, their coach, who say, "We'll get through this. We're going to learn from it." They have a positive outlook that comes out of it, and all these are manifested through our attitudes, and our attitudes manifest themselves through the words we speak, the body language, as we mentioned, through the things we do, the kind of person we are, and they write the future that we'll walk into. So, as you think of that, what is it that maybe you've been doing? I know me, my attitude, I can get very irritated and aggravated, and I don't always display the best attitude. There's an individual who, you know, and he's not the only one, but they say certain things that, sound uplifting, but the actions aren't there. They may bless someone else when they could have blessed me. And here I was struggling, and yet they looked right past me, didn't even give it a thought. Yet they say they love me. And I hear that stuff, especially through church. I hear that quite a bit. And it's very saddening how so many people in the church profess to love you, yet much of what they do, they go and bless strangers before they even think of blessing you. And here, it isn't to say that you should never bless a stranger, but you might be struggling, and this could help you through that. But it never even occurred to them to actually consider blessing you. But they love you, though. That stuff rubs me the wrong way. And, I don't generally will, let it, taint me to the point of really speaking out against anyone at first. But when you get that over and over and over and over and over, it never ends. I get to the point that I think, I need to speak up. And it's maybe going to step on their toes, figuratively speaking. But I say, I think it needs done. And did it need done? It may very well have been needed, because that's the only way to grab people's attention many times. You can say it politely and kindly, and they don't seem to really receive you as such, or they don't take it as a serious matter because you're quiet about it, you're calm, cordial. But when you come out, it doesn't mean you yell at them, but the words you speak are of a stronger language, not profanity, anything like that, but just where you speak of, what they are by doing such, and you speak it right out to them. I'm not one who's going to go and say it behind their back and not to them. I'll say it to them, and then I may at times say it to others. Sadly, probably shouldn't do that, but that's where my attitude gets to the point that it shouldn't be. But if we had people who, actually showed they that their actions spoke to what they speak, then we wouldn't grow to be like that. And is that a good? Do I have a good enough reason to be upset or to be bothered? I don't know that you say good enough, but I do say that it's validated. We're human. We each have feelings. Now we keep being told one thing and then not shown it over and over and over. We hear it but never see it hardly. And yet the very people they don't know, they'll go give it to. I think it validates the feelings that rise up within us. And that's just what's going to come forth, whether it's for good or bad. But one thing that we can do with others to help them not be that way toward us, and same with them, so they're not that way toward me or toward you, is that we don't just give, lip service. We don't just talk and say we care, we love, we like, we appreciate you. It's something that's to be shown. And that showing, while, actions are involved there, of course, actions speak louder than words, but also it's shown through our attitude, through the spirit in which we do things. I'm sure you've seen it yourself. We have people who, they, we're at a store and we ask a customer services associate, we say, do you have, such and such item, or can you point me to where the, you know, such and such is? And they may point you there. They might even take you there, which is what they should do if they can. They can't necessarily vacate their whole area if nobody else is there. But they may show you or point you there, take you there, but they may have a tainted spirit about it, like, you're bothering them. They do it reluctantly. They'd rather not, you can tell. Well, that's the attitude, the spirit, and when we say that, we need to see more of what's spoken to us, it involves the action, but also the attitude behind the action, the spirit. You can see it. It comes out loud and clear. In fact, the people who work at specific stores who are glad to help you, glad to help me, those are the folks I gravitate to. I want to go to them, especially if I know that, they can ring up my sale and they'll get credit, whether it's a commission to them or it goes, it tallies up in their sales quota that they have to meet. I want them to be rewarded because they're so good to work with. It just makes me appreciate them. Whereas those who, they might have answered my question or showed me where something is, but, you can tell they, wish you would leave them alone. Those folks just, I just don't want to make any time for them. I'd rather not even see them, I don't really look upon them in a positive light. I don't think much of them when I'm gone, but when I'm there, it's the reminder's there because I see them. And that's where our attitudes, will be affected, for good or for bad. So how can we help those we live with to, have better attitudes, have good attitudes? How can we help those we work alongside of or see quite frequently to have an attitude that we prefer? Well, it's not totally up to us. We can't really control what others are going to be or do. But what we can do is we can add to them, the ingredients to bring forth a recipe of goodness, of a positive outlook, having a good attitude, a positive spirit. And then we do that through our actions and the attitude behind the actions and the words, our language. When all three line up, it's very powerful. So, as we consider our attitude, what can we do for ourselves to help us to, get on the right path to growing and restoring a right attitude? Well, one thing that's all this, this growth and restoration is contingent upon is change. That 6-letter word, change. Many of us don't like change, some more so than others. No, our natural tendency is to settle into what's familiar. But then there's some of us that are more like myself who the same old bores me. Monotony just, it starts as boredom, then it spills over into, restlessness, which if it continues on will manifest itself through me in the form of impatience. And that's such as when I mentioned about people who say they love me, they care about me, yet they never even consider blessing me, but they'll take that same blessing that could have blessed me and helped me when I'm in a state of struggle. And they take it right to a complete stranger they don't even know and gladly give it to them. And as I said, I don't let that attitude rise up immediately. I don't, it doesn't really run all that deep to where it's can, rise up and spill out, right at the outset. But the continuation of it constantly, you know, that's that's what really speaks it to me, and where I feel I have to speak and say something, you know, because when the words, the actions, and the attitude line up for good, well, then, when they're done consistently and all three are there, it's all the more powerful. And when they don't line up, it's still very powerful when it's done over and over that way. It's just not for good. So, as we think of this change that's needed, and breaking loose from the town of the life of familiarity and walking away from ordinary into the unusual, or the extraordinary. What is it we can do? What is it about us? What will it take? How will we go about leaving the ordinary behind, leaving the land of familiarity to step into something better, to make something more, to be something more, and to lead others, to help them to experience this better way of life with us? What will you do? What can we do? If you have any thoughts, I gladly will, would love to hear you speak and type it in, share it with us on the show. And should you want, to just make a comment, and you don't want really your comment to be alluded to, you don't want me to reference it, just say so in your comments. But I'd love to hear what you have to say, and to even make a reference to your comments, and that if you'd like me to. And if you do, you don't need to say anything about making a comment, just don't comment. But I'd love to hear more from you. And then we're going to step away for our second commercial break. And when we come back, I'll get into more of what it is we can do and how we can go about, rectifying our attitude, or how we can make for a better attitude. What can we do to bring about this growth and restoration of a good attitude? We'll be right back.
Wow, that was insightful. Stay tuned as we go on a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Insights to Incite right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Are you seeking a speaker or coach who speaks life into your people? If so, look no further. Brandon Lawson is one who will inspire and motivate his audience, as well as empathize and relate to all. Reach out to Brandon and let him be your speaker and life coach by sending an email to brandon@connectandimpact.net or calling him at 513-520-7597. Brandon looks forward to speaking with you, to you, and for you. Let's connect and impact today. Insights to Incite, a real show with real-life messages. This show, which can be found on radio, TV, and our podcast, gives us insight to incite us to action and to excellence. Watch and or listen to Insights to Incite live at noon Eastern Time every Thursday on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Check out our past episodes on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us each week, and together we will escape the mundane. We are back with more Insights to Incite, so get ready and tune in to listen and watch. Now, once again, let's join Brandon Lawson.
Okay, so we had just left off as we spoke of, what it would take to grow and restore the right attitude. And we spoke of how this is contingent upon change. And the specific change that I'm alluding to is more about renewal And the term renewal or renew is very similar to another term we're familiar with called overhaul. When we think of, you're going to overhaul the engine in your truck. So do you just take that new engine, drop it in, and connect it, and it's all done? No, no. First, we remove the old engine. We can't just drop the new one right in place if that's still there. So we take the old engine out, the one that we're replacing, then we put the new one in. And overhaul, renew are much the same. There's, the concept is, to renew our minds, we can't just start depositing, good to one extent. We can, and that's often what we have to do. But, our desire is as we continue to fill our minds with the right, thoughts, to go forth and experience good experiences, to be in a good atmosphere, good environment, is that it will penetrate, it will come into us so much that it lifts all the negative, all the unhealthy things that are in us, that it lifts it, that it has a releasing effect. It releases and then lifts and puts it out. Consider this scenario. Say, you go in the kitchen, you pour yourself a glass of milk, then you put some chocolate syrup in, you stir it up, you have your chocolate milk. Then, maybe 45 minutes, an hour later, you've emptied your glass, and you take it into the kitchen and you set it in the sink. And maybe you didn't wash it immediately because, it was just that's all that was there. The sink was empty. And then the day goes by, you had dinner later, you got more dishes. And so tomorrow, you've cooked lunch and you want to make another glass of chocolate milk. So you go over to the sink, and there's that glass you used. And being that you had made chocolate milk from it and put the chocolate syrup in, as we know, much of that will still sit at the bottom. You'll still have some residue of the chocolate syrup. And it's set there for, since yesterday, maybe it's been something like 18, 20 hours now. And so it's sort of, you got this chocolate residue at the bottom of the glass, and you go to wash it. But say this glass it's a tall glass, and it doesn't have a big circumference. It's a rather skinny or small diameter circumference. And so it's to the point that you can't really push your hand down in to reach the bottom. Your hand won't fit. So what might you do? Well, many people might soak it and leave it there at first. But another thing you could do, and some of you probably would, is you get the water to where it's steaming hot. And you just let it run down in there and continue to run. And over time, that hot water will create the release of that chocolate syrup, that residue that's stuck to the bottom of your glass. It creates a release. And then as more water, the hot water comes in, not only is it released, but now lifts. It comes out. That is how it is with you and with myself, with us. Has our mind been tainted by, things that's happened to us that keep coming to mind and we keep thinking of and, we're reminded of, even if we try not to think of it? There's things that we see, hear that, just in our daily lives as we go about life. There's things that will trigger, will bring back experiences that aren't good. So we try our best to, reject those. We, try to think on things that are of a good rapport. And then as we do, as more and more good comes, more and more good, and with much greater frequency. The greater the frequency could be like the the faster the water is coming out of the faucet. You can barely lift the lever and just have a little trickle, a little stream, or you can lift it all the way up and have a gushing stream. And the frequency of how much good we think and consecutively, and continuously will be like the harder the water coming out, and the greater the force there is that creates the release of that residue, of that, you know, those thoughts that we'd rather not have, that we wish weren't there. That will create that release, and it will in turn create the lifting and releasing of it all. Release itself and lift out of us. That is how we renew our minds. And I want to share a scripture with you, actually a couple scriptures, but I want to start, if you're wanting to follow, in Romans chapter 12. This is quite a familiar passage. I mean, most of you may have heard it if you're in the church and if you go to church and services and study. But Romans 12, it's the very first two chapters, says, "Therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God." So we see that part about renew. And we think of, what can we do to bring about this growth and restoration? Well, we certainly need to renew. But even before we get to that part, because that's in verse 2, in verse 1, it spoke of offering your bodies or presenting your bodies as a living sacrifice. And, when we see that, and if we can get a caption of what that is, that's using not just merely your body, like when you think of body parts, but also your mind, your talents, your abilities, as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing unto God. It's where we sacrifice ourselves for the greater good of His kingdom. And many times that is through, how we are with others. Will we give up our free time for someone else? Will we change our schedule to make room for someone who is in need, someone who we know is hurting, whom we can help, that we can be that light to? Will we, sacrifice our wallets, our purses, our accounts to help someone else? Because the thing about sacrifice, I find that, when I want to show someone that I really love them, I want it to do something that's not only going to bless them, but that costs me. Because if it doesn't cost me anything, well, anybody could do that. I feel better in the fact that I sacrifice something of myself to be there for that person, to help him, to lift her, to love those folks, to love those people. And that's what it's about. If you're not giving up anything, you're not sacrificing, it's hard to really say that's love. Sure, it may be kindness. And, kindness and love may have somewhat of the same, features to them. But love will be kind even when it costs them. Whereas kindness can just be kindness alone. But in this is the experiences. It's the things we do. And then the renewing of our minds will bring forth the transformation, will bring forth that growth, that restoration of a right attitude, a good attitude, will help replace the wrong attitude. And while we need to think good things, one thing that will often precede the good thoughts is the words we speak. The words we speak will often, bring forth the thoughts we have, for better or for worse. And it is, key that we speak words of life, words of hope, that we speak out, you know, words of victory, that we uh, envision ourselves being victorious, that we believe God to bring us into a better state, that we believe that we're coming into something much better, that there's going to be a breakthrough in our lives or in our nation. But we when we start speaking it, then the thoughts start to think it more and more and more. And that's how your drip or drizzle of good thoughts turns into a little stream, to a stream that's even stronger, to a gushing stream that comes into your mind, that comes and lifts and lifts it releases the negative and lifts it out. And also through sacrificing yourself. I think you all know what I'm referring to, but it helps us to feel better about who we are. Knowing that not everyone would have done what we did, being that it cost us. There's a greater joy in that, and knowing that, we stepped up, that God spoke to our hearts, and we heeded His command, and we were the instrument He used to make it better. So there you have it. You see how those things will help us to, as it renews our minds, we have a new attitude, a new spirit about ourselves, and we can grow and be restored into the right attitude and live it out. And as I said a minute ago, we cannot avoid the bad things coming to mind, because just in going about life and things we hear, see, what have you, it's going to remind us of things that aren't good. So we cannot really control everything that enters into our mind. We can't, some things are going to come without us intending for them to come. They're going to enter in. But what we can do is we can choose whether we will allow that thought to take up residence and to live there day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Because if we allow it to, that's when those thoughts, as we were talked about earlier, become strengthened and fortified. And in due time, they become solidified, as our attitude has a way of searing them, those mere thoughts, searing them onto our conscience, our subconscious. They're seared onto and into our subconscious, and those beliefs become a part of us. We can do the same thing with good thoughts. Let them dwell upon your mind. Think of them, speak of them. And the ones that aren't good, cast them down. Say, this place isn't for you. We have no room for you. You'll have to go somewhere else. For instance, if we go over to 2 Corinthians chapter 10, we'll see what's spoken of here about casting down those thoughts. And it's in this chapter, and also in Ephesians 6, that Paul, who wrote both letters, explains that the troubles we have, in effect, are all spiritual issues. Yes, they manifest themselves in the physical realm, or perhaps they come forth in the emotional, mental realm, or in our financial, but really they're all tied. They're all rooted in our spiritual. And because he says in both 2 Corinthians 10 and Ephesians 6, it speaks to how we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but with the principalities of darkness in the spiritual realm. But as we look in 2 Corinthians 10, just want to start reading here in verse 3. For though we live in the body, we do not wage war in an unspiritual way, since the weapons of our warfare are not worldly, but are powerful through God for the demolition of strongholds. We demolish arguments and every high-minded thing that is raised up against the knowledge of God, by taking every thought captive to obey Christ. And we are ready to punish any disobedience once your obedience has been confirmed. But within there, you saw, it's the spiritual that we wrestle with, and talked about how we are to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. That is where you say, as this thought comes in, you ask yourself, is that of God? Is it not? If it's not, you cast it down. Cast it out. You say you have no place here. You have to go elsewhere. You're not allowed in. You refuse it. The privilege of taking up habitation in your mind. You don't let it to take up a residence there, because because if it does, and if it habitates there, it becomes habit. It becomes belief. It becomes a part of you, and many times a major part of you. Then if we turn over to Philippians, and as we said that this works for the good and for the bad, in terms of what do we feed our minds? What do we allow to live in us? What do we constantly run through our minds in that? And this is what Paul tells us is what we should think upon, what we should, take into our minds and dwell upon and rehearse and let to sit in there and simmer and be, in turn, become belief, become something more. He says in Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 4, he says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your graciousness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Don't worry about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses every thought, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is any praise, dwell on these things." That's the things we're to dwell on. That's the things that we're to take in. That's the things that are to absorb our minds. And we can help expedite that process to where our minds get to that by the things we speak, what we're saying. If you're sick, don't talk about your sickness. Speak to that sickness and tell them that, you may be strong, but my Father's stronger. You are not here to stay. You may be in debt or be lacking, and don't talk about how bad you have it. Talk about how, God has something much better on the way, and that He has promised that everything you put your hand to will prosper. If you feel weak, don't speak of the weakness, for the scripture says that he who feels weak, let him say that I am strong. And plus the scripture also tells us in 2 Corinthians, once again in chapter 12, it says that, for when we are weak, then we are strong. As that's when God's power speaks. That's when it rises up and comes into us and speaks from us. And it's God's power at work in our weakest times. He's the strongest in our lives. He's real. He's more evident to ourselves and those around us. So that is our lesson for today. We, through our attitude, our actions, and our words, we can write our course. We can direct and produce our life's film. We can be that person that will help others and helps ourselves to walk into a better future, to live out a better life, to be the best, to do, and to know His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Thanks for joining me. Glad you came, and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 12 noon Eastern. Thanks again.
Wow, what an insightful show. Thanks for listening in and watching today. If you missed any part of today's show or any other episode, check it out on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Now take today's insight and utilize it. Incite yourself to action and to excellence in the week ahead, and join us again next Thursday and every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Time for another insightful session with Brandon Lawson as he speaks to us and shares some more insights to incite right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV.